Gaming Bolt presents 15 bosses who seemed intimidating at first but were ultimately easy to defeat. A lot of the times when playing a game, there will be some badass looking boss you meet early on. They're super intimidating and the game is hyping up a big battle with them for ages. Then, when you finally do fight them, you beat them easily. Here's our list that highlights 15 such video game bosses. Please note that this list is based on each boss's intimidation factor and not whether they were the first or last boss in the game. The Black Hand, Shadow of Mordor. You're tormented by Nolan North's Black Hand character through the entirety of Shadow of Mordor. When you finally fight the terrifying creature from another dimension, or whatever, it turns out to only be a QTE fight during a cutscene. That's it. The whole game boils down to being able to press buttons when the game tells you to. It's easy, but devastatingly disappointing, and a bad mark on an otherwise great game. Bowser, Super Mario Galaxy 2. You know, there's just something about video game bosses that make them really easy. Bowser perfectly illustrates this point. In Super Mario Galaxy 2, Bowser is huge, attacking the tiny planet Mario is on. All you really have to do is run and jump around and he won't have really much hope in hurting you. Conversely, it's so easy to attack him because he's so massive and can't really get out of the way. The second half of the battle is even worse, when you're standing on some exploding rocks and he just spins at you. It's easy, but it's also really tedious as well. Electrocutioner, Batman Arkham Origins. The Electrocutioner, perhaps maybe the most famous of all Batman villains, or even of all comic book villains in general, deserves a much better boss battle in Arkham Origins than he got. Actually, nobody knows who he is, except for hardcore fans, so maybe he got the fight he deserves. When you come across him, Batman defeats him with a single kick to the face. Later, after having to track this guy down across the city, you finally find him in a warehouse, at which point the Joker kicks him out of a window. Parasite Queen, Metroid Prime. The Parasite Queen is a slow, big, and scary monster, but also really easy to fight. Just dodge her attacks, circle strafe it while shooting it in the face, and that's it. The fight against Parasite Queen is so easy, you'll probably be able to beat it quite quickly. The Parasite Queen looks like a giant cockroach that moves like one and can shoot green goo, yet she goes down in seconds. Human Reaper, Mass Effect 2. Reapers in Mass Effect are supposed to be terrifying creatures, and the Human Reaper you run into in the second game is no exception, at least at first. There's just something inherently scary and intimidating about a race of machines that can corrupt any life form. Yet, the fight with the Human Reaper itself is so easy it really takes away from the effect. Like many bosses on this list, it's massive and more or less stands still in one place. Its attacks are slow and makes them easy to dodge, and the boss is such a huge target you have to go out of your way to miss it. Mettaton, Undertale. Mettatonus is a TV star in Undertale and a robot with a soul, a rare sight. What makes Mettaton both interesting and creepy is that he was originally built to entertain, but has since turned into a killing machine, or so it seems. If you're playing the Genocide run, Mettaton can not only be killed in a single hit, but he also can't do any damage to you whatsoever despite transforming into his Neo form. Creep, Fear 3. The Creep is a manifestation of the memory of Harlan Wade. It acts as the main antagonist in Fear 3 as it haunts the Point Man and Paxton Fettle throughout the game. Intimidating at first, the Creep is pretty easy to defeat. Players just need to shoot its weak spot, which is nothing but a glowing red spot on its throat. During the battle, replica troopers will be summoned, but they do little to make the boss fight hard. In the end, Creep is one of those bosses that looked like it would give you a good run for your money, but that hardly turned out to be the case. The Destroyer, Borderlands. Borderlands' ending is infamous for how terrible it is. You're told throughout the game that there's this big vault with incredible loot inside, but in reality it's pretty much empty save for a world-destroying monster. The fight with this monster, appropriately known as the Destroyer, is just as disappointing as the contents of the vault. Being a big boy, you'd pretty much just walk around the beast, easily dodging its attacks while shooting it a few times. It's one of the many cases in video games where you have this big and bad boss which ultimately is too intimidating for its own good. Ancient Wyvern, Dark Souls 3. The Ancient Wyvern in Dark Souls 3 is a massive, scary dragon. Anyone who has ever played a Dark Souls game can tell you how horrifying this concept is. It's a huge monster that can fly, screeching and roaring at you. You go into the fight expecting to die several times and have to learn how to fight it like any other Dark Souls boss, but that's not what happens. Instead, an easy tactic was discovered that you can kill it in just one hit. Simply fight your way through smaller enemies while climbing the stairs to get above it, and then do a plunge attack down onto the dragon's head. Dead, in one hit. Vaas, Shadow of the Colossus. Shadow of the Colossus is a game that's nothing but boss battles. As the name suggests, all of these bosses are giants, and their sheer size alone is intimidating. But Vaas, in particular, with his giant club, is particularly creepy since he's the first you come across in the game, and boy, isn't he huge and intimidating. Beating him is easy though, as he starts the battle simply walking away from you. All you need to do is get him to attack, dodge out of the way, and then climb up his arm. You climb up the side of him and stab his weak spots while he's powerless to do anything to stop you. The final Hive boss, Gears of War 4. You expect the final boss of any game to be tough, especially when it's a giant grotesque monster you've heard nothing but bad things about. But the final Hive boss in Gears of War 4 is anything but tough. It essentially sits on the floor and vaguely waves its tentacles at you. Whenever it misses, and unless you stand perfectly still, it will, you run up to its tentacle and chainsaw it off. Rinse, wash, and repeat a few times, and it'll die in no time. Alduin, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Like all dragon fights in Skyrim, Alduin's boss battle is pretty disappointing and far too easy. You'd expect him to be some massive, epic, grueling battle since he's the last boss of the game, but his fight is no different from any other dragon fight. Helplessly watch him fly around you in circles, with neither of you doing much of anything, wait for him to land, and stab him in the face a couple times until he's dead. At least this guy is pretty during the fight, because you're going to spend most of your time looking at it. Cleric Beast, Bloodborne. Like any Dark Souls game, Bloodborne was made by the same people, the Cleric Beast is scary as hell. Sure, it's the first boss in the game and it's intimidating as hell. It comes out of practically nowhere and charges at you down a narrow bridge. You feel like you have nowhere to go and no hope until you realize you can just slide underneath it and hit it in the back a few times. Being a game from Software, the boss is still somewhat difficult, but compared to the rest of the game, this is a walk in the park. The Hive Mind, Dead Space. Imagine a giant worm that had spider legs and a mouth inside of a mouth with weird green things sticking out at you. That's the Hive Mind in Dead Space, a creepy example of science gone wrong. It's horrifying and disgusting, yet it's also really easy to beat when you get over the look of it. It'll pick you up a few times and attack you with its legs, but it doesn't really do much damage. You can just shoot it a few times, and like many other bosses on this list, it'll go down in no time. Vaas, Far Cry 3. Vaas was a great villain in Far Cry 3, but his boss battle and death left many questions. You're sent to confront him in one final battle, but instead you end up in a weird dream sequence and kill many fake visions of him before killing the real Vaas with a single stab to the chest. But even then, it's unsure if he even dies, and you're plunged into another dream afterward. The most disappointing aspect of this fight is perhaps its design. The boss fight paid no respect towards a man who was trying to explain the definition of insanity throughout the game.
And that wraps it up. What are your thoughts about this? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and share it on Twitter and Facebook. And why not consider subscribing? We upload some really cool videos almost every day. Thank you for watching this video, and happy gaming!